Second white coat. Subscribe and like. Let's learn medicine together.
All right, let's put on our detective hats for this one. We're diving into a medical mystery that all starts with a parent's concern, a single observation about their child that kicks off this whole investigation. And it's going to lead us, clue by clue, to a pretty specific diagnosis. So let's get right to that first piece of evidence.
So there it is, that one sentence, that's our starting point. And it's powerful, right? It cuts straight to the core of the problem. We've got an 8-month-old boy, and this little detail about his right hand, that's the first breadcrumb on the trail. I mean, think about it. Why would a baby favor one side so much? It's a big question. Let's dig in.
Okay, so just like in any investigation, first things first, we have to gather all the clues. We need to build a complete picture of this child. I mean, starting from the very beginning, from birth, all the way up to what the doctors are seeing in the exam room right now.
And boom, right away, we get a huge clue. 28 weeks. This little guy was born extremely prematurely. Just to put that in perspective, a full-term pregnancy is around 40 weeks. So this isn't just some small detail on a chart. No, this is a critical piece of the puzzle. It completely changes the game and really helps us narrow down what we might be looking at.
And from that premature birth, well, the challenges just start to pile up. We learn he spent a tough 3 months in the NICU, the neonatal intensive care unit, he had a low birth weight, and now at 8 months old, he's not hitting those big motor milestones you'd expect. He's not rolling over, he can't sit up on his own, he's not crawling. The picture is definitely starting to come into focus here, and it's pointing to a pretty significant developmental issue.
Okay, now the physical exam. This is where we get our most solid, concrete evidence. And what we find is that this isn't just some vague, all-over delay. Oh no, it's super specific. The doctors find increased muscle tone, basically stiffness, and his reflexes are way overactive. But here's the kicker. It's only on his right side. And that clenched right hand his parents mentioned? Yep, there it is. This is not a random collection of symptoms, you guys. This is a very, very specific clinical signature.
All right, so let's step back and look at what we've got. We have an extremely premature birth. We have a history of missed developmental milestones. And we have this very distinct pattern of stiffness all down one side of his body. So, the big question is, what's the one thing, the one diagnosis that can connect all of these dots?
Well, when you lay out all those clues and connect the dots, they all point, and pretty strongly I might add, to a diagnosis of cerebral palsy. Every single one of those seemingly separate facts, the prematurity, the delays, that one-sided stiffness, it all comes together and points directly at this one condition.
So what is cerebral palsy anyway? Let's break it down. At its core, it's a condition that stems from an injury to the brain that happens right around the time of birth. And here's a really important point. The injury itself doesn't get worse. It's what we call non-progressive. But the effects of that injury, the impact it has on how the brain controls muscles, that's permanent.
And this is exactly why this little boy's case is, well, it's almost a textbook example. You can literally go down the checklist for the classic signs of cerebral palsy. Delayed milestones? Yup, check. Increased muscle tone, which has a medical name, spasticity? Check. Overactive reflexes or hyperreflexia? Check. And that abnormal posture like the clenched fist? Big check. It's just a perfect match.
But, a diagnosis is really just a label. The real question, the one that solves the mystery, is why? Why did this happen? And to answer that, we have to go all the way back to our very first clue, his premature birth. What is it about being born so early that makes a baby's brain so vulnerable to this specific kind of injury?
Okay, the specific name for the brain injury we're talking about here is periventricular leukomalacia. Yeah, it's a total mouthful, I know. But let's just break it down. Periventricular just means around the ventricles. Those are the fluid-filled spaces in the brain. And leukomalacia means softening of the white matter. So right there, around the ventricles, that's our scene of the crime.
So here's the tragic chain of events. In a premature baby, the brain is still a construction zone. And the white matter, you can think of it like the brain's electrical wiring, is super, super fragile, especially in that area right around the ventricles. To make matters worse, that specific spot just doesn't have a great blood supply. So if there's even a small dip in blood flow, that's called ischemia, that fragile white matter tissue can actually die off. And once that wiring is damaged, well, you're left with a permanent problem with motor control.
Now, an absolutely critical part of being a good medical detective is ruling out the other suspects.
You have to be sure that no other condition fits the evidence this well. In medicine, this is called making a differential diagnosis, and it's what gives doctors confidence that they've landed on the right answer.
So let's look at the lineup of other possibilities. Could it be a brachial plexus injury, maybe from a difficult birth? No, that causes a kind of floppy weakness, and our patient has the opposite. He has stiffness. Okay, what about something like diffuse cerebral atrophy, which is just a fancy way of saying widespread brain damage? Also unlikely. That would affect both sides of the body, but our patient's problems are clearly on one side. See? The evidence just doesn't line up with these other suspects.
So, let's wrap this case up. We followed the clues, we identified our prime suspect, we even figured out the motive, the underlying biological cause, and we've ruled out all the other possibilities. It's time to put a bow on it and state the final conclusion.
When you boil it all down, the whole story is this. You have a premature baby with a classic set of symptoms: delayed milestones, stiffness, and overactive reflexes, all happening on one side of the body. That very specific pattern is a bullseye for a diagnosis of spastic cerebral palsy. And we know it's caused by that very specific injury to the brain's white matter.
And really, if there's one single thing to take away from all this, it's this. What happened to this child wasn't just some random, unlucky event. This specific type of cerebral palsy is a direct, almost predictable result of the natural vulnerabilities that exist inside a premature baby's still developing brain.
You know, this case is a really powerful example of how doctors can piece together clues to diagnose a condition that's so deeply tied to the challenges of being born too soon. But it also leaves us with a much bigger question, right? As modern medicine gets better and better at saving these extremely vulnerable babies, how do we also get better at protecting their brains during that critical period and giving them the best possible future? And that really is the next great challenge.